You're exhausted. Maybe you can't name the exact reason, but you feel it deep in your bones, a heaviness that never quite lifts, a weight you carry even in your sleep. It's as if there's an invisible load pressing down on your shoulders, and you've been carrying it for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to stand upright without it. You wake up tired, you go to bed tired, and somewhere between those two moments, you spend your entire day trying to hold everything together, trying to keep everyone happy, trying to avoid conflict, trying to be the person everyone expects you to be. Always kind, always understanding, always available. You learned early that being good was the right thing to do. You were taught that good people win in the end, that kindness gets reciprocated, that if you're fair, honest, and humble, the world will notice and reward you accordingly. You believed that love and respect were earned through selflessness, that if you gave enough, cared enough, sacrificed enough, people would see your worth. But what if I told you that's a lie? A comfortable, convenient lie designed to keep you compliant, predictable, and controllable. The invisible chains. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. How many times have you swallowed your words to keep the peace? How many times have you ignored your own needs to avoid disappointing someone else? How many times have you let someone disrespect you, use you, walk all over you, and you still smiled, still said, "It's okay," still pretended it didn't hurt? You've buried your tears, your anger, your pride, all in the name of being good. And what did you get in return? Ignored, overlooked, taken for granted. Sarah knows this feeling all too well. Sarah is a senior executive at a multinational tech company in San Francisco. On paper, her life looks perfect. Corner office, six-figure salary, respected by her peers. But behind closed doors, Sarah is drowning. She's the person everyone comes to when they need something. The problem solver, the mediator, the one who stays late to help colleagues meet their deadlines while her own work piles up. Last month, her manager passed her over for a promotion she'd been working toward for 3 years. The position went to Derek, a man who joined the company 2 years after Sarah, who takes credit for team wins, who's never stayed past 5 p.m. to help anyone. When Sarah asked why, her manager said, "Derek has more executive presence. He commands the room." Translation: Derek takes up space. Sarah makes space for others. That night, Sarah sat in her car in the parking garage and cried. Not because Derek got the promotion, though that stung, but because she realized something terrifying. She had made herself invisible by being too accommodating. She had become so good at saying yes, so skilled at reading the room and adjusting herself to fit everyone else's needs, that nobody saw her as a leader. They saw her as a resource, a tool, someone to use, not someone to respect. Sarah's story isn't unique. It's the story of millions of people who were raised to believe that goodness equals worthiness, that selflessness equals love, that accommodation equals respect. But here's what nobody told you. The world doesn't reward good people. It rewards strategic people. The brutal truth about virtue. If you're reading this, it's because you've lived this. You've tried to be the good person, the understanding friend, the reliable colleague, the selfless partner. And you've been disappointed. You're starting to notice a painful pattern. The more you try to be accepted, the less respect you receive. The more you compromise, the more people demand. The more you give, the less you're valued. And this is where Niccolo Machiavelli enters the conversation. Machiavelli wasn't the devil that many people claim he was. He was simply the first person willing to speak the naked truth about how power actually works, a truth that most people refuse to accept. He understood something fundamental about human nature that society desperately tries to hide. Morality divorced from reality is a trap. Being good and being effective are not the same thing. Being good and being valued are not the same thing. Being good and being respected are definitely not the same thing. In this exploration, we're going to have an unfiltered conversation about why you need to stop trying to be good, not because you should become cruel or heartless, but because you need to wake up. You need to wake up from the childish dream that the world is fair, that virtue alone will get you rewarded, that being a good person is enough. It's not enough, and deep down, you already know this. The mechanics of your exhaustion. Let's talk about what's really happening inside your body and brain when you operate in constant people-pleasing mode. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, has spent the last decade studying the neurological patterns of what she calls compulsive accommodators, people who chronically prioritize others' needs over their own. Her findings are startling. When you consistently suppress your authentic responses, your anger, your boundaries, your true opinions, to maintain an image of agreeableness, your brain enters a state of chronic stress. Your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for threat detection, becomes hyperactive. It starts treating normal social situations as potential dangers. What we see in brain scans, Dr. Chen explains, is that people-pleasers develop neural pathways similar to those found in individuals with anxiety disorders. Their brains are constantly scanning for signs of disapproval, constantly calculating how to adjust their behavior to avoid rejection. It's exhausting at a cellular level. This isn't just psychological, it's physiological. Your body is keeping the score. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you laugh when something hurts, every time you accommodate when you want to resist, your nervous system registers it. Cortisol levels rise, sleep quality deteriorates, immune function weakens. You're not just emotionally drained, you're biologically depleted. And here's the cruelest irony. While you're destroying yourself trying to be good, the people you're accommodating rarely even notice your sacrifice. To them, your availability is just normal, expected, unremarkable. Who actually gets respected? I want you to look around. Really look. Who gets admired in your workplace? Who gets promoted? Who gets their voice heard in meetings? Who gets respect, influence, and power? Is it the most generous people? The most compassionate? The most fair? Or is it the most strategic? The most decisive? The hardest to manipulate? The truth is harsh, but it's real. The world is governed by utility, not niceness. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He didn't write The Prince to teach people how to be evil. He wrote it to show how the game is actually played, not how we wish it was played, but how it is played. One of his most painful lessons is this: being good is not enough. In most cases, being good is the fastest way to become disposable. You can spend your entire life being loyal, kind, and understanding. You can give your best effort, help people without expecting anything in return, sacrifice your own needs for the collective good. But the moment you stop being useful, you're forgotten. Your position is filled. Your contributions are dismissed. And worst of all, the people who benefited from your goodness won't feel a shred of guilt about it. Because the world doesn't measure your value by your morality. It measures your value by what you offer, what impact you create, what presence you command. The good child syndrome. Have you noticed something? The good people are always chasing, always explaining themselves, always trying to prove they deserve what they've earned, always seeking validation. Meanwhile, the people who set boundaries, who say no, who show up unapologetically as themselves, they're respected, they have presence, they have space, they have a voice. Why? Because blind kindness is interpreted as weakness, someone who never pushes back, who never poses a threat, who never challenges the status quo. That person isn't taken seriously. They're seen as a resource, not a person, a tool, not an individual. You can tear yourself apart trying to please everyone, but if you don't represent power or consequence, people won't hesitate to use you. I know this is harsh, but it's true. Machiavelli wrote that if a leader had to choose between being loved and being feared, they should choose to be feared. What this means is, real respect comes from the perception that you have the power to act, that you can't be taken advantage of without consequences, that you're not a replaceable piece in someone else's game. This applies to you too. If you continue living just to appear pleasant, you'll continue being seen as someone who's easily disposable. Not because you're bad, but because the world doesn't reward those who fade into the background. The origin of the disease. It's time to understand where this desperate need for approval comes from. Because behind your kindness, there's something deeper, something that's been sabotaging you for years. You didn't come into this world wanting to please everyone. This was taught to you. Worse, it was conditioned into you. From childhood, you learned that acceptance had a price. Pieces of yourself traded for approval, forced smiles, swallowed desires, silenced thoughts, all for the promise of belonging. Don't do that, it's rude. Be nice. Don't talk back. You're too good for that. These phrases, repeated over and over, slowly shaped you to fit others' expectations. But nobody told you that constant people-pleasing is an emotional trap. A psychological prison built with toxic compliments and punishments disguised as guidance. You learned that if you pleased others, you'd be loved. If you showed anger, set boundaries, or acted selfishly, you'd be rejected. So your mind did what it had to do to survive. It adapted. The problem is that adaptation has become surrender. Today, you don't know how to say no without feeling guilty. You feel responsible even when you're destroying yourself for someone else's benefit. You're disappointed, but you swallow it. You're hurt, but you forgive too quickly. You exhaust yourself maintaining an image that others expect, not because it's who you are, but because it's what gives you a sense of security. But here's the real truth. This isn't kindness. This is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not being loved, fear of being seen as bad, fear of showing up as your real self, with your desires, your anger, your boundaries, your voice. This fear has turned you into someone who sabotages themselves. You hide behind socially acceptable but emotionally destructive behaviors. And the tragic part? You don't even realize you're doing it. You call it empathy, but it's fear of conflict. You call it understanding, but it's fear of abandonment. You call it kindness, but it's fear of not being enough. Your kindness is actually an unconscious mask to avoid the pain of rejection, but the cost of this mask is devastating. It's suffocating your authenticity, your power, your dignity. If you don't remove this mask, it will fuse to your skin. It will become your identity. And one day, you'll look in the mirror and not recognize who's staring back. The Machiavellian wake-up call. But there is a way back. To find it, we need to learn from someone who understood image, perception, and strategy better than anyone. Machiavelli. Marcus learned this the hard way. Marcus is an emergency room physician in London. For 15 years, he prided himself on being the doctor everyone could count on. He took extra shifts when colleagues called in sick. He mentored younger doctors. He stayed late to comfort patients' families. He never complained, never asked for recognition, never pushed back when administrators piled more work onto his already crushing schedule. Last year, Marcus had a breakdown. Not a dramatic one. There was no public meltdown or hospital scene. It was quiet. He simply sat in his car after a 16-hour shift, stared at the steering wheel, and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt joy, or peace, or even basic contentment. His marriage was failing. His kids barely knew him. His body was falling apart. High blood pressure, chronic insomnia, stress-related digestive issues. And despite all his sacrifice, despite all his goodness, the hospital administration had just denied his request for a sabbatical. They needed him too much, they said. He was too valuable. Translation: he was too compliant to lose. That night, Marcus made a decision. He would stop being good in the way. He'd been taught goodness was supposed to look. He would start being strategic. He began saying no. He stopped taking extra shifts unless he was compensated appropriately. He started delegating instead of doing everything himself. He set clear boundaries about his availability. At first, people were shocked. Some called him changed, cold, even selfish. But something unexpected happened. He started getting more respect. His colleagues began valuing his time. Administrators started actually negotiating with him. His family got their husband and father back. Marcus didn't become cruel. He became sovereign. And that's the distinction we're going to explore in the next part of this journey. There's a question you need to ask yourself, and I need you to answer it with complete honesty. When was the last time you did something purely for yourself without immediately calculating how others would perceive it? When was the last time you made a decision based solely on what you wanted, not what would keep the peace, not what would make you look good, not what would avoid disappointing someone? If you're struggling to answer that question, you're not alone. You're living with what psychologists now recognize as one of the most pervasive yet invisible addictions of our time: approval addiction. And like any addiction, it's slowly destroying you from the inside out. The architecture of your cage. Dr. James Thornton, a clinical psychologist specializing in attachment trauma at the University of Melbourne, has spent 20 years studying what he calls the good child complex, a pattern of behavior that begins in early childhood and calcifies into a personality prison by adulthood. Most people don't realize they're living in a cage, Dr. Thornton explains. They think they're just being nice, just being cooperative, just being a good person. But what they're actually doing is performing a role they learned was necessary for survival. Let me take you back to when this started for you. You were probably 5, maybe 6 years old. You did something that upset a parent, a teacher, or another authority figure. Maybe you spoke too loudly. Maybe you said something brutally honest that embarrassed an adult. Maybe you showed anger or frustration in a way that was deemed inappropriate. And what happened? You were punished. Not necessarily physically, though for some of you, that too, but emotionally. You were met with disappointment, withdrawal of affection, silent treatment, or the dreaded phrase, "I'm very disappointed in you." For a child, parental disappointment is a form of psychological death. Your developing brain interprets it as, "I am not safe, I might be abandoned, I need to fix this immediately." So you learned to read the room. You learned to suppress the parts of yourself that caused discomfort to others. You learned that love was conditional, that acceptance had terms and conditions, that your worth was determined by your compliance. And here's the truly insidious part. This learning wasn't conscious. It was encoded deep in your nervous system, below the level of rational thought. It became automatic, reflexive. By the time you reached adolescence, you no longer needed external authorities to enforce these rules. You had internalized the warden. You had become your own jailer. The neuroscience of self-betrayal. Let's get specific about what's happening in your brain when you chronically abandon yourself to please others. Your brain has a region called the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, which activates when you experience social pain, rejection, exclusion, disapproval. Fascinatingly, this same region lights up during physical pain. Your brain literally processes social rejection the same way it processes a broken bone. Now, imagine you're in a meeting. You have an idea that contradicts what your boss just said. Your authentic response would be to voice your perspective, but your ACC starts firing. Warning signals: danger, potential rejection, potential exclusion from the group. Simultaneously, your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, kicks in with justifications. Maybe my idea isn't that good. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's better to just agree. It's not worth the conflict. You stay silent. You nod in agreement. You smile. And in that moment, several things happen. 1. Your amygdala registers a threat response, even though there's no actual physical danger. 2. Your hippocampus files this memory as further evidence that speaking up is dangerous. 3. Your reward system gets a small hit of relief. You avoided the discomfort of potential conflict. 4. Your sense of self fragments a little more. You just betrayed your own knowing. Do this enough times, staying silent when you want to speak, agreeing when you want to disagree, laughing when you want to cry. And your brain creates a superhighway of self-abandonment. It becomes your default mode of operating. This is why you can't simply choose to stop people-pleasing. It's not a conscious choice anymore. It's a deeply grooved neural pattern that fires automatically before you even realize what's happening. Elena's canvas of compliance. Elena Martinez grew up in a strict household in Barcelona. Her father was a successful architect who valued precision, order, and conformity. Her mother was a former ballet dancer who emphasized grace, beauty, and never making a scene. From an early age, Elena showed a natural talent for painting, but her art was wild, emotional, chaotic, full of dark colors and unsettling imagery that made her parents uncomfortable. "Why don't you paint something beautiful?" her mother would ask, with that particular tone of disappointment that cuts deeper than any criticism. "This isn't going to lead anywhere," her father would say. "You need to be practical." So Elena adjusted. She started painting what her teachers praised, what galleries accepted, what collectors bought: soft landscapes, gentle abstracts, safe, pretty, forgettable art. By the time she was 35, Elena had achieved what most artists dream of: representation by a respected gallery in Madrid, regular sales, features in art magazines. She should have felt successful. Instead, she felt hollow. "I would stand in front of my own paintings at exhibitions," Elena told me, "and feel absolutely nothing. They weren't bad paintings, they were technically competent, aesthetically pleasing, but they weren't mine. They were what I thought other people wanted me to create." Everything changed when Elena's gallery represented a new artist, a 23-year-old from Berlin whose work was raw, confrontational, and unapologetically strange. The art world went crazy for her. Elena watched this young woman receive the acclaim, the attention, the respect that had always eluded her, and she realized something crushing. The world doesn't reward people for being good, it rewards people for being real. The young artist wasn't trying to please anyone. She wasn't making art to be liked. She was creating from a place of fierce authenticity, and people could feel it. That night, Elena went home and destroyed every painting in her studio, every safe, pretty, pleasing piece. She stood in the wreckage of her compliance and made a vow. She would never again create art to be approved of. She would create to be true. The transition was brutal. Her gallery dropped her. Sales dried up. Some collectors who had bought her previous work felt betrayed. as if she'd broken some unspoken contract to remain predictable. But something else happened. New galleries became interested, edgier spaces that valued authenticity over palatability. Different collectors reached out, people who wanted art that made them feel something, even if that something was uncomfortable. Most importantly, Elena felt alive again. She had reclaimed herself. The three faces of fear. Let's break down the specific fears that drive your people-pleasing behavior, because once you can name them, you can begin to dismantle them. Fear number 1, the fear of abandonment. This is the deepest, most primal fear. It comes from the true and terrifying fact that as infants we literally could not survive without our caregivers. Abandonment meant death. Even though you're now an adult who can survive independently, your nervous system still carries this ancient terror. When you sense disapproval or potential rejection, your body reacts as if your survival is at stake. This is why saying no feels so impossibly difficult. Your body is screaming, if you disappoint them, they'll leave you and you'll die. Rationally, you know this isn't true. But your nervous system doesn't operate on rational thought. The people-pleasing behavior this creates, saying yes when you mean no, overcommitting, sacrificing your needs to maintain connection, tolerating disrespect rather than risking someone leaving. Fear number 2, the fear of being seen as bad. You've been taught that there are good people and bad people, and you've desperately tried to stay on the good side of that line. But this binary is a trap. The truth is, everyone contains multitudes. Everyone has selfish impulses, angry thoughts, petty feelings. The difference is that some people have been given permission to be fully human, while others, like you, were taught that certain parts of yourself are unacceptable. So you've spent your life performing goodness, being the understanding one, the patient one, the one who never gets angry, never holds grudges, never prioritizes themselves. But this performance is exhausting, and underneath it, there's a terrified part of you constantly worried, what if people see the real me? What if they discover I'm not actually as good as I pretend to be? The people-pleasing behavior this creates. Excessive apologizing, over-explaining your decisions, bending over backwards to prove you're considerate, never expressing anger or frustration even when it's justified. Fear number 3, the fear of conflict. Somewhere along the way, you learned that conflict is dangerous. Maybe you grew up in a household where conflict meant screaming, violence, or days of cold silence. Maybe you watched someone you loved get hurt for speaking their truth. So you developed a conflict avoidance strategy. Be agreeable, don't rock the boat, smooth things over. Become the peacekeeper, the mediator, the one who absorbs tension so others don't have to feel it. The problem is, you can't have authentic relationships without conflict. Disagreement is how boundaries get negotiated. Friction is how different perspectives create something new. Conflict, when handled well, deepens intimacy rather than destroying it. But you never learned how to handle conflict well. You only learned how to avoid it. So you sacrifice your truth to maintain false peace. The people-pleasing behavior this creates. Agreement, even when you disagree. Laughing off things that hurt you. Accepting blame that isn't yours to take responsibility for others' emotions. Staying silent when you should speak up. The East-West paradox. Interestingly, the manifestation of people-pleasing varies across cultures, but the underlying psychology remains consistent. Dr. Yuki Nakamura, a cross-cultural psychologist based in Tokyo, has studied how collectivist versus individualist cultures shape people-pleasing behaviors differently. In Western cultures, particularly in North America and parts of Europe, People-pleasing often manifests as a conflict between the cultural ideal of individualism and the personal fear of rejection, Dr. Nakamura explains. People are told to be yourself and stand out, but they're terrified of actually doing so. So they perform a version of individuality that's still carefully curated for approval. In Eastern cultures, particularly in East Asia, the culture explicitly values harmony and group cohesion, but this creates a different kind of trap. People suppress their individual needs not just out of fear, but out of a genuine belief that self-sacrifice is virtuous. The psychological damage is the same, but the justification is different. What's universal, Dr. Nakamura found, is this. Regardless of culture, people who chronically abandon themselves to please others show similar patterns of depression, anxiety, and diminished life satisfaction. The cage might be decorated differently, but it's still a cage. The body keeps the score. Your people-pleasing isn't just creating psychological problems, it's creating physical ones. Dr. Amara Okafor, a physician specializing in psychosomatic medicine in Lagos, Nigeria, sees patients every day whose physical symptoms are manifestations of chronic self-abandonment. I had a patient, a 42-year-old woman who came in with chronic migraines, digestive issues, and unexplained body pain, Dr. Okafor recalls. We ran every test. Everything came back normal, so I started asking different questions. It turned out the woman was the primary caregiver for her aging parents, the emotional support for her siblings, the peacekeeper in her marriage, and the dependable colleague at work. She was everyone's rock, everyone's safe place, but she had no safe place of her own. I asked her, "When was the last time you said no to someone?" Dr. Okafor continues. She started crying. She said, "I don't know if I even know how." The woman's body was screaming what her voice couldn't say. "I can't do this anymore. I'm breaking." This is what happens when you chronically override your body's signals. When you smile through discomfort, when you say yes, when everything in you wants to say no, when you tolerate what shouldn't be tolerated, your body registers the betrayal, and eventually, your body will force you to stop. The distinction between kindness and compliance. Here's what you need to understand. Real kindness and people-pleasing are not the same thing. Real kindness comes from a place of fullness. It's a genuine choice to extend compassion, generosity, or support because you want to, not because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. Real kindness has boundaries. It knows when to give and when to withhold. It understands that you can't pour from an empty cup, that sustainable generosity requires self-preservation. Real kindness can say no. It can disappoint people. It can prioritize your own needs without guilt. People-pleasing, on the other hand, comes from a place of deficit. It's driven by fear, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as bad. It's not actually about being kind to others. It's about managing your own anxiety. People-pleasing has no boundaries. It gives until there's nothing left, then finds more to give by cannibalizing your own well-being. People-pleasing can never say no without drowning in guilt. It makes you responsible for everyone else's emotions while completely ignoring your own. Here's a simple test. After you do something kind, how do you feel? If you feel genuinely good, fulfilled, warm, connected, that's probably real kindness. If you feel resentful, depleted, or anxious about whether it was enough, that's people-pleasing. The Awakening. Marcus, the London physician we met earlier, described his awakening this way. For 15 years, I thought I was being a good doctor, a good colleague, a good person. I wore my sacrifice like a badge of honor. But one day, my 9-year-old daughter drew a picture of our family in school. In the picture, there was my wife, my 2 kids, and our dog. I wasn't in the picture. When I asked her why, she said, "Because you're never home, Daddy. You're always at the hospital." And I realized I had sacrificed my family to be a good doctor. I had destroyed my health to be a good colleague. I had abandoned myself completely to maintain an image of goodness. And the cruelest part? Nobody at the hospital even noticed. Nobody thanked me for my sacrifice. Nobody said, "Marcus, you've given enough. You can rest now." Because from their perspective, my constant availability was just normal. It was just who I was. That's when I understood. I wasn't being good. I was being compliant. I was being convenient. I was being controllable. This distinction between genuine virtue and performative compliance is everything. And it's exactly what Machiavelli tried to teach us 500 years ago. Machiavelli's uncomfortable truth. In The Prince, Machiavelli wrote something that still shocks readers today. A man who wants to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to ruin among so many who are not good. Read that again. Let it sink in. If you insist on being good in every situation, with every person, in every circumstance, you will be destroyed by those who don't operate with the same constraints. This isn't cynicism, this is observation. Think about your own life. How many times have you been honest while others lied, fair while others cheated, generous while others took? And how many times did your goodness protect you? How many times did the universe reward your virtue? The painful truth is this: the world is not set up to reward goodness. It's set up to reward effectiveness. And effectiveness requires strategy. It requires understanding that people don't operate from morality. They operate from self-interest, from fear, from the pursuit of power and security. Machiavelli didn't hate virtue. He hated naivety. He hated watching good people get destroyed because they refused to understand how the game is actually played. He knew that in a world full of predators, defenseless kindness is just fresh meat in the middle of the forest. The road forward. So, where does this leave you? You're starting to see the cage you've been living in. You're beginning to understand that your goodness has been a prison, not a virtue. You're recognizing that people-pleasing has cost you more than you ever wanted to admit. But you're also probably feeling scared. Because if you're not the good, agreeable, accommodating person you've always been, then who are you? This is the question we'll answer in the next part of our journey. In Part 3, we're going to explore how to step into strategic authenticity, how to be powerful without being cruel, how to set boundaries without becoming cold, how to reclaim yourself without losing your capacity for genuine connection. We'll learn from Machiavelli's most famous metaphor, the fox and the lion. And we'll discover that true strength isn't about choosing between being good or being strong. It's about being wise enough to know when each is required. The transformation is beginning. The question is, are you ready to continue? There's a scene in The Prince that most people misunderstand completely. Machiavelli writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." Most readers interpret this as an endorsement of deception. Be fake, wear masks, manipulate perception. But that's not what Machiavelli was teaching. He was revealing something far more sophisticated. The gap between perception and reality is where power lives. The question isn't whether you should care about how you're perceived. You already do. That's why you've spent your entire life trying to appear good. The question is, are you managing perception strategically, or are you being controlled by it? There's a massive difference. The two animals. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must know how to use the nature of both the beast and the man, and among beasts he must choose the fox and the lion. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. This isn't about being cruel. It's about being complete. The fox represents intelligence, awareness, pattern recognition. The fox sees hidden agendas, understands social dynamics, recognizes manipulation before it happens. The fox is strategic, careful, perceptive. The lion represents presence, power, the ability to command respect through sheer force of being. The lion sets boundaries not through explanation, but through embodiment. The lion doesn't need to prove anything. The lion simply is. Most people-pleasers are neither fox nor lion. They're deer, constantly alert for danger, ready to flee at the first sign of conflict, hoping that if they're gentle and non-threatening enough, the predators will leave them alone. Spoiler: the predators never leave them alone. Tomas and the Boardroom Trap. Let me tell you about Tomas Rivera, a chief financial officer at a pharmaceutical company in São Paulo, Brazil. Tomas was brilliant with numbers. He could spot financial inefficiencies that others missed, predict market trends with uncanny accuracy, save the company millions through strategic cost analysis. But he was terrible with people, or rather, he was terrible at managing how people perceived him. Tomas was honest to a fault. If the CEO asked for his opinion, Tomas gave it, unfiltered, data-driven, sometimes brutally direct. He believed that his competence would speak for itself, that his track record would earn him respect, that doing good work was enough. It wasn't. The company's CEO, a charismatic man named Enrique, ran the organization through a complex web of alliances, favors, and carefully managed relationships. Enrique valued loyalty over competence, appearance over substance, and he surrounded himself with people who made him feel smart rather than people who were actually smart. Tomas watched year after year as less qualified executives got promoted above him. People who spent more time playing golf with Enrique than analyzing spreadsheets. People who told Enrique what he wanted to hear rather than what he needed to know. Tomas felt bitter, betrayed. The company was rewarding politics over performance, image over integrity. It wasn't fair, and he was absolutely right. It wasn't fair. But here's what Tomas failed to understand. Fairness is not a law of nature. It's a human construct, and in the real world, it's optional. Everything changed when Tomas hired an executive coach, a former CEO named Isabel, who had spent 30 years navigating corporate politics. "You think you're above the game," Isabel told him during their first session. "You think that playing the game means compromising your integrity. But you're wrong. You're already in the game. You're just playing it badly." Isabel taught Tomas something crucial. Strategic authenticity isn't about being fake. It's about being intentional. Tomas didn't need to become a sycophant or abandon his principles, but he did need to understand that competence without strategic positioning is invisible. Excellence without relationship building is impotent. Truth without political awareness is dismissed. Isabel gave Tomas a reading assignment: The Prince. Not to become manipulative, but to become aware. Tomas learned to be the fox. He started paying attention to the unspoken dynamics in meetings, who held real power versus who held titles, what motivated different executives, where the hidden alliances were. He learned to recognize traps before walking into them. He also learned to be the lion. He stopped over-explaining his recommendations as if begging for approval. He started presenting his analyses with quiet confidence, making it clear that he wasn't seeking validation. He was offering valuable insight that they could take or leave. The shift was subtle but profound. Tomas didn't change who he was. He changed how he showed up. Within 18 months, Tomas was promoted to Chief Operating Officer, not because he became a politician, but because he became strategic. He learned that power isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about making sure the room knows you're smart, values your intelligence, and understands there are consequences to ignoring you. The perception equation. Let's talk about something most people find deeply uncomfortable. Image management is not the same as deception. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, a professor of organizational psychology at Kyoto University, has spent 2 decades studying what he calls the perception gap, the difference between how people see themselves and how others see them. Most people operate under a dangerous assumption, Dr. Yamamoto explains. They believe that if they're good people doing good work, others will naturally recognize and reward that. This is statistically false. Dr. Yamamoto's research shows that in professional settings, 67% of high performers are perceived as average because they fail to communicate their value effectively. 43% of significant contributions go unrecognized because the person who made them didn't ensure visibility. 58% of people who describe themselves as authentic are perceived by others as invisible, forgettable, or lacking presence. The harsh truth, Dr. Yamamoto continues, is that impact without visibility equals irrelevance. Your work doesn't speak for itself. You must speak for your work, and you must speak in a language that your audience can hear. This isn't manipulation. This is communication. Think about it. When you dress professionally for an important meeting, are you being fake? No. You're being strategic. You understand that first impressions matter, that visual presentation influences how your ideas are received. When you choose your words carefully in a negotiation, are you being dishonest? No. You're being thoughtful. You understand that the same message can land differently depending on how it's framed. When you build relationships with influential people in your field, are you being a user? No, you're being smart. You understand that connection is currency, that networks create opportunity. Strategic authenticity means being your genuine self while understanding the context you're operating in. It means speaking your truth in a way that can actually be heard. It means showing up fully while being conscious of how you're being perceived. It's the difference between being naive and being sovereign. The naivety trap. Naivety believes that good intentions are transparent, that honesty is always rewarded, that the universe has a moral arc that bends toward justice. Sovereignty understands that intentions are invisible, that honesty without strategy can be weaponized against you, that justice is something humans must create and enforce. It doesn't happen automatically. Here's a painful example. Jennifer Chen was a social worker in Vancouver, Canada. She spent her career working with vulnerable populations, homeless youth, domestic violence survivors, people struggling with addiction. Her work was driven by genuine compassion, by a deep belief in human dignity and the possibility of redemption. Jennifer's organization hired a new director, a man named Robert, who came from the corporate world with promises of scaling impact and operational efficiency. Within 6 months, Robert had restructured the organization to prioritize metrics over mission, to value quantifiable outcomes over relationship-based care. Jennifer watched as programs that actually helped people but didn't produce impressive statistics got cut. She watched as caseloads increased to unsustainable levels. She watched as her colleagues burned out and quit, one by one. Jennifer spoke up. She presented data. She shared stories of clients whose lives had been transformed by the very programs Robert wanted to eliminate. She appealed to the organization's stated values, to their founding mission, to basic human decency. Robert smiled, thanked her for her input, and ignored everything she said. Here's what Jennifer didn't understand. Robert didn't care about the mission, he cared about his resume. This job was a stepping stone to a position at a larger nonprofit with a higher salary. He needed to show transformational leadership and fiscal responsibility to his next employer. The actual impact on vulnerable people was irrelevant to his agenda. Jennifer kept operating from the assumption that if she just presented the right arguments, appealed to the right values, showed enough passion, Robert would listen. She was being naive. What Jennifer needed was to be strategic. She needed to understand Robert's actual motivations and speak to those. She needed to build alliances with board members who had the power to constrain Robert's decisions. She needed to document everything, create paper trails, and make it politically costly for Robert to continue his destructive course. She needed to be the fox, see the trap, and the lion, have the power to fight back. By the time Jennifer realized this, it was too late. The organization she'd dedicated 15 years to was unrecognizable. She left, heartbroken and disillusioned. "I thought being right was enough," Jennifer told me. "I thought caring deeply was enough. I thought the truth would win. But I was playing a completely different game than Robert was, and I lost." The 3 levels of awareness. Machiavelli understood something that modern people often miss. There are different levels of consciousness when it comes to power dynamics. Level 1, the innocent. These are people who don't even see the game being played. They genuinely believe that everyone operates from the same values they do, that people mean what they say, that the system is fundamentally fair. The innocent gets taken advantage of constantly, but doesn't understand why. They keep extending trust to people who haven't earned it, keep expecting reciprocity that never comes, keep believing that doing the right thing will eventually be rewarded. This was you. Maybe this is still you. Level 2. The bitter. These are people who have seen the game and feel betrayed by it. They've been burned enough times to recognize that the world doesn't work the way they were taught it should. But instead of becoming strategic, they become cynical. The bitter person withdraws. They stop trusting anyone, they harden their hearts, close themselves off, become suspicious of everyone's motives. They think they're protecting themselves, but they're actually just building a different kind of prison. Some of you are here now, angry, hurt, tempted to shut down completely. Level 3. The strategic. These are people who see the game clearly and choose to play it with skill. They understand that power dynamics exist, whether they acknowledge them or not, that naivety is not virtue, that awareness is not corruption. The strategic person maintains their values while understanding how the world actually works. They're kind, but not naive, generous, but not exploitable, honest, but not foolish. They've integrated the fox and the lion. This is where Machiavelli wants to take you. This is where sovereignty lives. Historical mirrors. Let's look at some examples from history. People who understood strategic authenticity before it had a name. Eleanor Roosevelt was First Lady of the United States during one of the most turbulent periods in American history. She could have stayed in the traditional lane expected of political wives, smile pretty, host teas, stay quiet about important issues. Instead, Eleanor became one of the most influential advocates for civil rights, labor rights, and women's rights of her generation. But she did it strategically. Eleanor understood that as a woman in the 1930s and 40s, direct confrontation would get her dismissed as hysterical or overstepping her bounds. So she worked through networks, built alliances, used her platform as First Lady to shine light on issues that others were trying to hide. She wrote a daily newspaper column that reached millions of Americans. She held press conferences that only female reporters could attend, forcing news organizations to hire women journalists. She traveled to places her husband couldn't go and served as his eyes and ears, shaping policy through strategic influence. Eleanor Roosevelt was the fox and the lion. She saw the traps of her time, the gender barriers, the political constraints, the social expectations, and she navigated them brilliantly. She commanded respect not by demanding it, but by making herself indispensable and undeniable. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison under South Africa's apartheid regime. When he was finally released, he had every reason to seek revenge, to lead a violent uprising against his oppressors, to let rage guide his actions. Instead, Mandela chose strategy over emotion. He understood that if South Africa descended into racial civil war, everyone would lose. He needed to dismantle apartheid while keeping the country intact. He needed to achieve justice without creating chaos. So Mandela did something astonishing. He learned the language and culture of his captors. He studied Afrikaans poetry. He understood the fears and motivations of white South Africans, not because he agreed with them, but because he needed to be able to speak to them in a way they could hear. When Mandela became president, he invited his former prison guard to his inauguration. He created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which prioritized healing over punishment. He wore a Springbok rugby jersey, a symbol that had represented white supremacy, to unite the country around a shared victory. This wasn't weakness. This was strategic genius. Mandela was both fox and lion, understanding the psychological landscape of his nation while commanding moral authority that no one could ignore. The power of calculated vulnerability. Here's something that might surprise you. Strategic authenticity doesn't mean hiding your humanity. It means choosing when and how to reveal it. Dr. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability has shown that selective vulnerability, sharing your authentic struggles with the right people in the right contexts, actually increases trust and deepens connection. The key word there is selective. Naive vulnerability is dumping your trauma, your needs, your fears on anyone who will listen without consideration for context or boundaries. This doesn't create connection, it creates burden. Strategic vulnerability is consciously choosing to share your authentic self in ways that serve connection, that build trust, that create mutual understanding. Think about the difference. Naive vulnerability. Telling your boss during a performance review that you're struggling with depression and can't handle your workload. Strategic vulnerability. Building a trusted relationship with your boss over time, then having a thoughtful conversation about mental health resources and workload management when you have enough relational capital to have that discussion constructively. Naive vulnerability. Posting every emotional struggle on social media, seeking validation from strangers. Strategic vulnerability, sharing your story with specific people who have earned the right to hear it, in contexts where your openness can genuinely help others who are struggling with similar issues. See the difference? Strategic vulnerability protects you while still allowing authentic connection. Naive vulnerability leaves you exposed in ways that often backfire. The Perception Management Toolkit. Let's get practical. How do you actually develop strategic authenticity? How do you become the fox and the lion? Tool number 1, situational awareness. Before you enter any important interaction, ask yourself, what are the power dynamics in this situation? What does the other person actually want? Not what they say they want? What are the unspoken rules of this environment? What is my actual goal here, and what's the smartest way to achieve it? This isn't manipulation, it's preparation. Tool number 2, communication calibration. The same message can land completely differently depending on how it's delivered. Learn to calibrate your communication style to your audience. Speaking to analytical thinkers? Lead with data and logic. Speaking to relationship-oriented people? Lead with story and connection. Speaking to power-driven individuals? Lead with outcomes and results. You're not being fake, you're being multilingual. Tool number 3, strategic silence. You don't have to comment on everything, attend every meeting, or respond to every provocation. Sometimes the most powerful move is strategic absence. Notice who consistently volunteers for everything and how they're perceived. Often they're seen as eager to please rather than valuable. Scarcity increases perceived value. Tool number 4, alliance building. Identify people who share your values or have complementary skills. Build genuine relationships with them. Not to use them, but to create mutual support networks. Power is rarely achieved in isolation. Even the most independent people have networks of allies who amplify their voice and provide strategic support. Tool number 5, boundary enforcement with grace. You can say no, set limits, and protect your energy without being harsh. Strategic boundary setting doesn't require aggression, it requires clarity. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not available for that is complete. You don't need to justify, defend, or over-explain. The lion doesn't explain why it won't be hunted. What strategic authenticity is not, let me be crystal clear about what we're not talking about, lying. Strategic authenticity is about choosing what to reveal and when, not about being dishonest. Manipulation. Manipulation is using people as objects for your gain. Strategic authenticity is understanding human psychology while maintaining genuine care. Cruelty. You can be strategic without being mean. Power doesn't require coldness, abandoning your values. This is about protecting your values by being smart about how you pursue them. Becoming a sociopath. Sociopaths lack empathy. Strategic people have empathy but also have wisdom. What we're talking about is sophisticated adulthood, the ability to hold both compassion and discernment, both authenticity and awareness, both heart and strategy. The integration. Remember Tomas, the CFO in São Paulo? After working with his coach, Isabel, he described his transformation this way. I used to think there were 2 types of people, good people who cared about the truth, and political people who only cared about power. I thought I had to choose between being ethical and being effective. But Isabel taught me that this is a false dichotomy. The most ethical thing I can do is be effective, because if good people refuse to understand power, then only power-hungry people will have it. I'm still the same person with the same values. I still believe in data-driven decision-making, fiscal responsibility, and serving the company's long-term interests. But now I also understand that ideas don't implement themselves. Change doesn't happen just because it should happen. You have to build the coalitions, navigate the politics, and position yourself in ways that give your good ideas actual power. I'm not playing politics. I'm playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, and I'm doing it so that the right things actually get done. That's strategic authenticity. In Part 4, we're going to give you a concrete roadmap for transformation. We'll explore how to actually make the shift from people-pleasing to sovereignty without losing your humanity. We'll cover the psychological traps that will try to pull you back, the practical steps for rewiring your nervous system, and the specific strategies for setting boundaries that actually stick. The philosophy is important, but now it's time for action. There's a moment in every transformation where theory meets practice, where intellectual understanding crashes into the messy reality of actually changing your life. This is that moment. You've seen the cage. You understand how people-pleasing has been slowly destroying you. You've learned that strategic authenticity isn't manipulation, it's survival. You've absorbed the wisdom of the fox and the lion, But knowledge without application is just entertainment. And I didn't bring you this far to leave you stuck in analysis paralysis. So let's talk about the actual work of transformation, the uncomfortable, sometimes painful process of rewiring patterns that have been running your life for decades. The specific, actionable steps that will take you from people pleaser to sovereign individual. This won't be easy, but I promise you, it will be worth it. The transformation paradox. Here's something that trips up most people who attempt this journey. You can't think your way out of people-pleasing. You have to practice your way out. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, a neuroscientist at Northeastern University, explains why your brain doesn't distinguish between physical and emotional habits. Both are neural pathways that have been strengthened through repetition. And just like you can't learn to play piano by reading about it, you can't learn new emotional patterns by simply understanding them intellectually. Your people-pleasing responses are encoded in your nervous system. They're automatic, pre-conscious reactions that happen faster than rational thought, which means you need to create new neural pathways through repeated action, not just insight. Think of it like this. Your brain has a superhighway of people-pleasing behavior. 6 lanes, high speed, well-maintained. It also has a small, overgrown dirt path of self-advocacy, barely visible, rarely used. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you're widening that superhighway. Every time you speak your truth, set a boundary, or prioritize your needs, you're carving out that dirt path a little more. The goal isn't to destroy the highway, it's to build an equally strong alternative route so that you have a choice about which path you take. The pendulum trap. Before we dive into the specific practices, I need to warn you about the single biggest mistake people make during this transformation: the pendulum swing. This is what happened to David Foster, a high school teacher in Auckland, New Zealand. David spent 15 years being the favorite teacher, the one who stayed after school to help struggling students, who ran multiple extracurricular programs without additional pay, who never said no to administrators even when they piled unreasonable demands on him. His marriage suffered, his health declined. He barely saw his own children because he was so busy being a surrogate parent to everyone else's kids. When David finally reached his breaking point, he swung hard in the opposite direction. He became rigidly unavailable. He stopped helping students outside of contracted hours. He became cold, defensive, almost hostile to administrators. He started treating every request as an attack, every interaction as potential manipulation. David thought he was setting boundaries, but what he was actually doing was building walls. "I went from doormat to asshole," David admitted. "I thought that's what strength looked like. I thought I had to become hard to stop being soft." This is the pendulum trap. After years of self-abandonment, many people overcorrect into self-protection that borders on self-isolation. They confuse vulnerability with weakness, so they eliminate all vulnerability. They mistake openness for naivety, so they close themselves off completely. This isn't sovereignty. This is trauma response. Real transformation isn't about swinging from one extreme to another. It's about finding integration, the ability to be both strong and soft, both open and boundaried, both compassionate and discerning. It's about becoming whole, not just becoming the opposite of what you were. The 5 phases of transformation, based on my research and interviews with hundreds of people who have successfully made this shift, I've identified 5 distinct phases of transformation. Understanding these phases helps you know where you are and what to expect next. Phase 1, the awakening, where you are now. This is the moment when you can't unsee what you've seen. You've recognized that your goodness has been a prison. You understand that people-pleasing is self-abandonment dressed up as virtue. What happens in this phase? sudden clarity about past patterns, anger at yourself for tolerating so much, grief for time/energy/relationships lost, fear about who you'll be if you change what you need in this phase, permission to feel all of it, the anger, the grief, the fear. Understanding that awareness is the first step, not the final destination. Patience with yourself as you process years of suppressed truth. Common trap, getting stuck in analysis. You keep reading, researching, understanding, but not actually changing behavior. Knowledge becomes another way to avoid the discomfort of action. Phase 2, the experimentation, clumsy. Boundary setting. This is when you start trying out new behaviors. You say your first shaky no. You speak up in a meeting even though your heart is racing. You prioritize your needs even though guilt is screaming at you. What happens in this phase? Extreme discomfort with every new boundary, intense guilt after advocating for yourself, pushback from people who benefited from your old patterns, moments of wanting to give up and go back to easier people-pleasing. What you need in this phase. Expect it to feel wrong at first. This is normal. Celebrate small wins, even if they feel awkward. Find at least one person who supports your transformation. Remember, discomfort is not the same as danger. Common trap. Interpreting others' negative reactions as proof you're doing something wrong. When someone gets upset that you're setting boundaries, that's often evidence you're doing something right. Phase 3. The backlash. When others push back. This is when the people around you start reacting to your changes. Some will be supportive, others will try, consciously or unconsciously, to pull you back into your old role. What happens in this phase? People call you changed, selfish, or not yourself anymore. Some relationships naturally fall away, others deepen and become more authentic. You face tests of your new boundaries. What you need in this phase, recognition that resistance from others is often about their discomfort, not your wrongness. Willingness to let some relationships end or transform. Clarity about your non-negotiables, support system to help you stay grounded. Common trap, backing down when someone expresses disappointment. Remember, you can disappoint someone and still be a good person. Their disappointment is information, not instruction. Phase 4. The integration, finding your balance. This is when new patterns start to feel natural. You're no longer white-knuckling your way through boundaries. You can say no without drowning in guilt. You can prioritize yourself without feeling selfish. What happens in this phase? Boundaries feel protective rather than aggressive, less internal conflict about self-advocacy, better discernment about when to give and when to withhold, more energy, clarity, and peace. What you need in this phase, continued practice. Integration isn't a one-time achievement. Vigilance for old patterns trying to creep back in during stress. Celebration of how far you've come. Refinement of your approach based on what's working. Common trap. Thinking you're done and stopping the practices that got you here. Integration is ongoing, not a finish line. Phase 5. The embodiment. Living as your sovereign self. This is when your new way of being becomes your default. You don't have to think about setting boundaries. They're just naturally present. You don't question your right to take up space. You simply do. What happens in this phase? Authenticity feels effortless. You attract relationships that honor your wholeness. You have impact without exhaustion. You can be generous from overflow rather than deficit. What you need in this phase? Gratitude for your journey. Willingness to help others who are earlier in their path. Continued growth in new areas. Protection of what you've built. Common trap? Complacency. Even in embodiment, you need to maintain awareness and continue growing. The Practical Roadmap. 10 Transformational Practices. Now let's get into specific, actionable practices that will accelerate your transformation. Practice number 1. The Daily Boundary Audit. Every evening, ask yourself these 3 questions. 1. Where did I say yes when I meant no today? 2. Where did I abandon my truth to keep peace? 3. Where did I prioritize someone else's comfort over my own needs? Write down your answers. Don't judge yourself, just observe. Over time, you'll start to see patterns. You'll notice specific people, situations, or triggers that consistently lead to self-abandonment. Why this works? Awareness precedes change. You can't shift a pattern you haven't identified. Beginner version. Just do this once a week. Advanced version. Include a 4th question. What would I do differently tomorrow if a similar situation arose? Practice number 2. The Mini No Challenge. Your nervous system needs proof that saying no won't kill you, so we're going to start small. Week 1. Say no to something trivial at least once per day. No thanks, I don't want a receipt. No, I'll pass on dessert. No, I prefer the window seat. Week 2. Say no to small requests from people. No, I can't stay late today. No, I won't be joining this committee. No, I'm not available for that call. Week 3. Say no to something you'd normally say yes to out of guilt. No, I can't help you move this weekend. No, I won't be attending that event. No, I can't take on this extra project. Week 4. Say no, without explanation. Practice. No, that doesn't work for me. Full stop. No justification. Why this works? Your brain needs experiential evidence that boundaries don't lead to catastrophe. Small wins build confidence for bigger ones. Practice number 3, the pause protocol. This is the single most powerful tool for breaking automatic people-pleasing patterns. The protocol. When someone asks you for something, anything, pause before responding. Count to 3. Take a breath. Then say, "Let me check my calendar/energy/capacity and get back to you." This tiny pause interrupts the automatic yes that your nervous system has been conditioned to give. During that pause, ask yourself, do I actually want to do this? Do I have the genuine capacity? Is this aligned with my priorities? Am I considering this out of genuine desire or fear of disappointing someone? Why this works? Automatic yes is a reflex, not a choice. The pause creates space for actual decision-making. Script examples. That's an interesting opportunity. Let me think about it and respond by tomorrow. I appreciate you thinking of me. I need to check something before I commit. Give me 24 hours to look at my bandwidth and I'll let you know. Practice number 4, the emotional inventory. People-pleasers are often disconnected from their own emotional landscape. You've spent so much energy managing others' feelings that you've lost touch with your own. Daily practice, 5 minutes. Set a timer. Close your eyes. Scan your body. Notice what you're feeling without trying to change it. Then write down physical sensations, tight chest, clenched jaw, heavy shoulders, emotions, angry, sad, anxious, excited, needs that might be unmet, rest, connection, autonomy, recognition. Why this works? You can't honor needs you can't identify. This practice rebuilds your connection to your internal world. Advanced version. After identifying your emotions, ask, what does this feeling need from me right now? Sometimes it's action. Sometimes it's just acknowledgement. Practice number 5, the boundary script, library. 1. Reason people-pleasers struggle with boundaries is that they don't know what to say. So let's build your script library for Declining invitations. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not available. I appreciate the invitation, but that doesn't work for my schedule. I'm going to pass, but I hope you have a wonderful time. For declining requests. I don't have capacity for that right now. That's not something I can help with. I'm not the right person for this. For addressing disrespect. That doesn't work for me. I need you to speak to me differently. That's not okay with me. For protecting your time. I have a hard stop at time. I'm not available outside of hours. I need to keep this conversation to 10 minutes. For redirecting emotional dumping. I can see you're struggling. Have you considered talking to a therapist about this? I don't have the capacity to hold this right now. I care about you, but I'm not the right support person for this particular issue. Why this works. Having pre-written scripts reduces the cognitive load of boundary setting. You're not trying to compose a novel response in a high-stress moment. You're using a tested template. Practice tip. Write these down on your phone. Review them weekly. Rehearse them out loud. Practice number 6. The relationship audit. Not all relationships are worth preserving at any cost. Some relationships are actively harmful. Others have simply run their course. The audit process. Make 3 lists. List 1. Relationships that energize me? These are people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your growth, who see you as a whole person. After spending time with them, you feel more alive, more yourself. List 2. Relationships that drain me. These are people who consistently take more than they give, who resist your boundaries, who make you feel small or wrong for having needs. List 3. Relationships that are neutral. These are people who don't add much to your life, but don't actively harm you either. They're just there. Action steps. List 1. Invest more time and energy here. List 2. Reduce contact or end relationship entirely. List 3. Keep casual but don't prioritize why this works. Your energy is finite. Protecting it means being intentional about who gets access to you. Hard truth. Some people will fall into list 2, even though you love them. Love doesn't mean you have to tolerate mistreatment. You can love someone from a distance. Practice number 7. The self-advocacy training ground. Low-stakes situations are your training ground for high-stakes boundary setting. Practice opportunities. Return an item to a store, even if clerk seems annoyed. Ask for modifications at a restaurant. Separate check, substitution. Speak up when someone cuts in line. Correct someone who mispronounces your name. Ask a question in a large group, even if you feel stupid. Why this works. Each small act of self-advocacy builds your confidence and reprograms your nervous system to understand that advocating for yourself is safe. Reflection after each practice. What did I notice in my body before/during/after? What story was my brain telling me? They'll think you're difficult/annoying/demanding. What actually happened? Usually nothing catastrophic. How do I feel now that I did it? Practice number 8. The Guilt Tolerance Protocol. Here's an uncomfortable truth. You will feel guilty when you start setting boundaries. This is normal and doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Guilt is your old programming trying to pull you back into compliance. Your job isn't to eliminate guilt, it's to act despite guilt. The protocol. When guilt shows up, try this. 1. Name it. I notice I'm feeling guilty about saying no. 2. Locate it. Where do I feel this in my body? Often, chest, throat, stomach. 3. Breathe into it. Take 5 slow breaths, directing breath to where you feel the sensation. 4. Question it. Is this guilt based on me doing something actually wrong, or is it based on not meeting someone else's expectations? 5. Compassion. It makes sense that I feel guilty. I've been conditioned to prioritize others for decades. This feeling is uncomfortable but not dangerous. 6. Action anyway. Proceed with your boundary despite the guilt. Why this works? Guilt loses its power when you stop treating it as evidence of wrongdoing. It's just a feeling, not a fact. Remember, guilt means your nervous system is adjusting to new patterns. It will decrease over time as your new behaviors become normalized. Practice number 9. The energy budget. You have a finite amount of emotional, mental, and physical energy each day. People pleasers give energy away without tracking the cost. The practice. Imagine you have 100 energy units per day. Morning. Assess your starting energy. Are you well rested, stressed, excited? Throughout the day, notice what drains energy versus what restores it. Drains. Difficult conversations, people-pleasing, suppressing emotions. Restores. Boundaries, authentic connection, rest, joy, evening. Calculate your energy balance. Did you end the day in deficit, exhausted, depleted? Did you break even, managed but not thriving? Did you end in surplus, energized, fulfilled? Adjustment. If you're consistently ending in deficit, you need to reduce energy expenditure, say no more, set more boundaries, increase energy restoration, more rest, more joy, more authenticity. Why this works? You can't manage what you don't measure. This practice makes visible the invisible cost of people-pleasing. Practice number 10. The Sovereign Self Meditation. This is a daily visualization practice that helps you embody your emerging sovereign self. The practice. 10 minutes. Find a quiet space. Close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths. Step 1. Visualize your people-pleasing self. See yourself shrinking, apologizing, accommodating. Notice how this version of you feels in your body. Don't judge, just observe. Step 2. Visualize your sovereign self. See yourself, standing tall, speaking clearly, taking up space. This version of you knows their worth. This version can say no without guilt. This version is both strong and kind. Notice how this version feels in your body. Step 3. Merge the two. You're not abandoning the kind parts of yourself. You're adding strength, boundaries, self-advocacy. You're becoming whole, not just different. Step 4. Commitment. In your mind, speak one commitment for the day. Today, I will speak my truth, even if my voice shakes. Today, I will honor my no as much as my yes. Today, I will take up the space I deserve. Why this works? Your brain doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. This practice creates neural pathways for sovereignty before you even take action. The support structure. You can't do this alone. Trying to transform in isolation is like trying to learn to swim by reading a book on dry land. What you need, at least one witness. Someone who knows what you're working on, who can celebrate wins and support you through setbacks. This could be a therapist, coach, trusted friend, or support group. 2. Models of what you're becoming. Find people who embody sovereign authenticity. Study them. How do they set boundaries? How do they navigate conflict? How do they balance strength and compassion? 3. Accountability structure. Weekly check-ins with yourself or someone else. What boundaries did you set? Where did you slip back into old patterns? What will you do differently this week? 4. Compassionate self-talk. You will mess up. You will say yes when you meant no. You will people-please out of habit. When this happens, talk to yourself like you'd talk to a friend learning a new skill, with encouragement, not shame. When the old world fights back, Here's what nobody tells you about transformation. The people who benefited from your people-pleasing will resist your evolution. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but they will resist. Remember Sarah from Part 1, the tech executive who made herself invisible through over-accommodation? When Sarah started setting boundaries, her colleague Amanda was furious. Amanda had gotten used to Sarah covering for her mistakes, staying late to finish Amanda's projects, making Amanda look good to leadership. Sarah's constant availability had enabled Amanda's mediocrity. When Sarah stopped covering for her, Amanda tried multiple strategies to pull Sarah back into the old dynamic. Strategy 1. Guilt. I thought we were friends. Friends help each other. Sarah's response: we are friends, and friends also respect each other's boundaries. I'm not available to cover your projects anymore, but I'm happy to grab coffee and catch up. Strategy 2. Shame. You've really changed. You're not the team player you used to be. Sarah's response: you're right, I have changed. I'm learning to be a team player without being a doormat. Strategy 3. Appeal to old identity. Remember when we used to stay late together? Those were good times. Sarah's response: I remember burning out while you left at 5 p.m. I'm choosing differently now. Eventually, Amanda stopped trying. The friendship shifted. It became less intense but more honest. Or sometimes relationships like this end entirely. And that's okay. The truth, some people were only in your life because you made their life easier. When you stop sacrificing yourself for their convenience, they leave. This isn't a loss, it's a revelation. The Stoic integration. While Machiavelli teaches us about power and strategy, the Stoics teach us about inner freedom, and you need both. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is crucial for your transformation. You cannot control how people react to your boundaries, whether they understand your growth, if they approve of your choices, their disappointment, or anger you can only control. Your commitment to self-respect, your consistency with boundaries, your response to their reactions, your perseverance despite resistance. The Stoics would tell you, do what is right for you and release attachment to outcomes. Set the boundary. Let go of whether they accept it. Speak your truth. Let go of whether they hear it. Honor yourself. Let go of whether they validate it. This is the integration of Machiavelli's strategy and Stoic wisdom. Be strategic about your actions, but detached from others' reactions. The cost calculation. Let me be brutally honest about what this transformation will cost you. You will lose. Some relationships, the ones built on your self-abandonment, the comfort of being liked by everyone, the identity of the nice one, or the helpful one, the illusion that avoiding conflict keeps you safe, the false certainty that compliance equals love. You will gain self-respect, priceless, energy that was previously drained by people-pleasing, relationships based on authenticity rather than performance, the ability to sleep at night without resentment eating at you, freedom from the prison of others' expectations, your life back. Only you can decide if this trade is worth it. But I can tell you this, I have never met a single person who regretted reclaiming themselves. Not one. I have met thousands who regret waiting so long to start. In Part 5, we're going to bring this full circle with the final confrontation, the moment where you decide once and for all whether you're going to continue living for everyone else's approval or finally start living for yourself. This is where the philosophy becomes flesh, where the ideas become identity, where you choose who you're going to be. The final chapter awaits. It's time to stop pretending, You've read this far because something in you already knows the truth. The way you've been living is killing you. Maybe not, literally, though for some of you the stress-related health issues are getting there, but it's killing the part of you that's real, that's vibrant, that's alive. You're exhausted from carrying everyone else's emotional weight. You're resentful from giving so much and receiving so little. You're hollow from performing a version of yourself that gets approval while your authentic self slowly suffocates. And the worst part? You've known this for a while now, maybe for years, but you've been too scared to do anything about it. So let me ask you the question that will define the rest of your life. How much longer? How much longer are you going to play the role of the good person? How much longer will you sacrifice your voice, your energy, your dignity to maintain an image that isn't even real? How much longer will you trade your soul for the temporary comfort of being liked? This is it. This is the moment where you decide. The illusion of rescue. Let me tell you something that no one wants to hear, but everyone needs to understand. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to walk into your life, recognize all your sacrifices, and say, "You've done enough. You can rest now. Let me take care of you the way you've taken care of everyone else." That's not going to happen. The people who have benefited from your people-pleasing, they don't see it as sacrifice. They see it as who you are. Your constant availability isn't remarkable to them. It's expected. Your endless accommodation isn't appreciated. It's assumed. You think if you just give a little more, sacrifice a little longer, prove yourself a little further, then finally, someone will see your worth and reward it. But that day never comes. Because here's the brutal truth that took me years to accept. The world will take as much as you're willing to give, and then ask for more. This isn't cruelty. This is just how systems work. If you signal that you're available for exploitation through your inability to say no, through your chronic overfunctioning, through your desperate need for approval, people will unconsciously organize their lives around your willingness to carry burdens that aren't yours, not because they're evil, because you've trained them to. Maria's awakening. Let me tell you about Maria Santos, a hospice nurse in Manila, Philippines. For 23 years, Maria was the person everyone turned to. At work, she took the hardest patients, the most challenging families, the overnight shifts that no one else wanted. At home, she financially supported her aging parents, her unemployed brother, her sister's children, and her own 3 kids. Maria never complained. She told herself that this was love, that this was duty, that this was what good people do. Then she had a heart attack at 47 years old. As Maria lay in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, her family gathered around her. And do you know what they talked about? Who would take care of everyone now that Maria was sick? Not, how do we support Maria's recovery? Not, how did we let things get this bad? But, what are we going to do without her? Even her heart literally breaking wasn't enough to make them see her as a person rather than a resource. That's when Maria had her awakening. "I realized," she told me 6 months later, "that I had spent my entire adult life waiting for someone to notice how much I was carrying and offer to help. I kept thinking, surely someone will see, surely someone will care enough to lighten my load." But they never did. And lying in that hospital bed, I finally understood why. I had never asked them to. I had never set a single boundary. I had never said, "This is too much." I had taught everyone in my life that I was an endless, well, they could draw from forever. And they believed me. Maria's recovery wasn't just physical. She made a decision in that hospital room that changed everything. She would never again wait for permission to value herself. She cut her work hours by 30%. She told her brother he had 6 months to find employment or find somewhere else to live. She stopped sending money to extended family members who were perfectly capable of supporting themselves. She started saying no without explanation or guilt. Some family members were angry. Some called her selfish. Some said she'd changed, that she wasn't the Maria they knew. They were right. She wasn't. The old Maria almost died trying to be everything to everyone. The new Maria chose to live. "I thought people would abandon me if I stopped being useful," Maria said. "But you know what happened? The people who actually loved me, not the version of me that served them, but me, those people stayed. And they respected me more, not less. Everyone else? They were never really there anyway. They were just there for what I could do for them." The cost of continued compliance. You know what your people-pleasing is costing you. Let's make it explicit. What you're losing. Right now, 1. Time you'll never get back. Every minute spent on obligations you don't want, maintaining relationships that drain you, doing things out of guilt rather than genuine desire, that's time stolen from your one finite life. 2. Energy that could fuel your dreams. Think about all the energy you pour into managing others' emotions, avoiding conflict, being who they need you to be. What could you create, build, or become if you redirected even half of that energy toward your own goals? 3. Relationships based on authenticity. When you're always performing, always accommodating, always adjusting yourself to fit others' needs, you never get to find out who would love the real you. You're surrounded by people who like your mask, not your face. 4. Self-respect that compounds over time. Every time you betray yourself, say yes when you mean no, laugh when something hurts, stay silent when you should speak, you lose a little respect for yourself. And that loss compounds. It accumulates. Until one day you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. 5. The person you could have become. The version of you that exists in potential, confident, boundaried, fully expressed, unapologetically alive, is waiting. But that person can't emerge while you're busy being who everyone else needs you to be. What continued compliance will cost you. If you don't change, here's what the next 5 years look like. Year 1, more of the same, slightly more resentment, slightly less energy. You tell yourself next year will be different. Year 2, a wake-up call, health scare, relationship crisis, professional disappointment. You make temporary changes, but slip back into old patterns when the crisis passes. Year 3, deeper exhaustion. You start to feel numb. The resentment hardens into bitterness. You notice you're cynical about things that used to matter to you. Year 4, a major breaking point, breakdown, burnout, or breakdown of a significant relationship. But even now, you might rationalize it as just a rough patch, rather than the inevitable consequence of chronic self-abandonment. Year 5, you're a shell, going through the motions, secretly wondering if this is all there is, watching younger people make the same mistakes you made and wanting to warn them, but staying silent because you still can't speak your truth. Or, and this is the alternative, you make a different choice. Right now. Today. The sovereignty decision. Here's what sovereignty actually means. It's not about becoming cold. It's not about never helping anyone. It's not about selfishness or cruelty. Sovereignty is the decision that your life belongs to you, that your time, your energy, your body, your choices, these are yours to govern, not up for committee vote, not subject to everyone else's preferences. Yours. Sovereignty means you decide what you're available for, not guilt, not obligation, not fear of disappointing someone. You honor your no as much as your yes. Both are complete sentences. You're kind from choice, not compulsion. generosity that comes from overflow, not depletion. You can disappoint people and still be a good person. These things are not mutually exclusive. You belong to yourself first, and from that foundation, you can genuinely connect with others. This isn't selfish. Selfishness is demanding that others sacrifice themselves for your comfort, which is exactly what people-pleasers have been allowing others to do to them for years. Sovereignty is the opposite of selfishness. It's self-ownership. It's the mature recognition that you can't give what you don't have, that you can't love others well if you don't love yourself at all, that you can't be truly generous if you're running on empty. The testimonies. I want you to hear from people who've made this journey, real people who stood at the exact crossroads where you're standing now and chose sovereignty over compliance. James, 52, corporate attorney, London. I spent 30 years being the guy everyone could count on, the partner who took the cases no one else wanted, the father who never missed a game, the son who called his mother every day, the friend who showed up for everyone. I had a stroke at 50, spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and the thing that broke me wasn't the stroke, it was realizing that even in the hospital, I was worried about everyone else, worried about my clients, about letting my team down, about whether my kids were okay without me. I wasn't worried about myself. I hadn't worried about myself in decades. Recovery forced me to stop. Physically, I couldn't do everything I used to do. And you know what happened? The world kept turning. My clients found other attorneys. My team managed. My kids stepped up. My mother survived without daily calls. Everything I thought would collapse without me didn't. That's when I realized I wasn't indispensable. I was just available, and I'd mistaken chronic availability for love. 3 years later, I'm healthier than I've been in decades. I work less. I say no constantly. I disappoint people regularly. And I'm finally at peace. The people who matter are still here. Everyone else. I don't even remember their names. Yuki, 34, elementary school teacher, Osaka. In Japanese culture, we have a word, gamen. It means enduring the unbearable with patience and dignity. I was taught that gamen was virtuous, that suffering in silence was strength. I carried gamen into every relationship. When my boyfriend criticized me constantly, I endured with patience. When my principal gave me impossible workloads, I accepted with dignity. When my mother demanded I quit my job to care for my aging grandmother, I considered it seriously. Then I met my friend Akiko, who had moved to New York for 10 years and come back different. She had this presence, this calm certainty. She said yes when she wanted to and no when she didn't, without apology. I asked her how she did it. She said, "Yuki, gammon isn't always virtue. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a cultural costume." That sentence changed my life. I started questioning, what am I enduring that I should actually be resisting? What patience is protecting others from facing consequences? What dignity am I using to hide from my own anger? I left my boyfriend. I set boundaries with my principal. I told my mother I would help find care for grandmother but wouldn't sacrifice my career. My family said I'd become Americanized, that I'd lost my Japanese values, but that's not true. I didn't lose my values, I found my voice. And for the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving, I'm living. Carlos, 41, social worker, Buenos Aires. I thought my job was to save everyone. Every client's trauma became my trauma. Every crisis became my emergency. I couldn't sleep because I was worried about people who weren't even thinking about me. My therapist finally asked me, "Carlos, who gave you permission to set yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm?" I didn't have an answer. She said, "You're not helping anyone by destroying yourself. You're just teaching them that it's okay to use people up and throw them away. Is that what you want to model? That question haunted me. I realized by having no boundaries, I was actually enabling dysfunction. My clients never learned to manage their own crises because they knew I'd always swoop in. My colleagues never stepped up because they knew I'd handle it. My martyrdom wasn't helping anyone. It was just making me feel important while slowly killing me. Now I have office hours. I don't answer calls after 6 p.m. I take my vacation days. I refer clients to other resources instead of being their only resource. And you know what? My clients are doing better because they had to learn to help themselves. I was never their savior. I was just their crutch, and I was breaking under the weight. The reality check. Let's do a brutal honesty exercise. I want you to answer these questions. Really answer them, not the sanitized version you tell yourself. When was the last time you did something purely for yourself without calculating how others would perceive it? If you can't remember, you've been living for others' approval for too long. When was the last time you said no without guilt? If you can't remember, you've lost the ability to self-advocate. When was the last time you prioritized your needs over someone else's wants? If you can't remember, you've forgotten that needs and wants aren't equivalent. When was the last time you felt genuinely seen and valued for who you actually are? If you can't remember, you're surrounded by people who only know your mask. When was the last time you felt energized rather than depleted after social interaction? If you can't remember, all your relationships are extractive. These aren't rhetorical questions. These are diagnostic questions. And if you can't answer them, you're not living. You're performing. The final choice. So here we are, the moment of truth. You can close this and go back to your life. Continue being the good person, the reliable one, the one who never causes problems. Continue sacrificing yourself on the altar of other people's comfort. You can tell yourself that things aren't that bad, that you're fine, that everyone has to deal with difficult people and unreasonable demands, that this is just how life is. You can wait for permission that will never come. Wait for the perfect moment that doesn't exist. Wait for someone to rescue you from a prison you're the only one who can unlock. Or you can decide right now that you're done. Done performing, done shrinking, done abandoning yourself to keep the peace. Done being a supporting character in your own life story. You can decide that your sovereignty is not negotiable, that your voice matters, that your needs are valid, that your no is sacred. You can decide that you'd rather be respected than liked, that you'd rather be authentic than approved of, that you'd rather be sovereign than safe. This is not a comfortable choice. Choosing sovereignty means choosing discomfort. It means disappointing people who've grown comfortable with your compliance. It means facing conflict you've spent your life avoiding. It means sitting with guilt that will scream at you that you're being selfish. But here's what sovereignty also means. It means waking up without dread. It means looking in the mirror and recognizing yourself. It means having energy for the things and people you actually care about. It means authentic relationships instead of performative ones. It means your life finally belonging to you. The question isn't whether you should choose sovereignty. The question is, how much more of your life are you willing to waste before you do? The call to action. If you're still reading this, you're ready. You might not feel ready. Readiness is a feeling that comes after action, not before. But you're ready. So, here's what you're going to do. Within the next 24 hours. 1. Say one authentic no, not a weak no with 15 explanations. A clear, clean no. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. No. 2. Identify one relationship that exists because of your compliance. You know which one it is. The person who only contacts you when they need something, the friend who talks for an hour about their problems but has never asked about yours, the family member who treats you like a resource. Write their name down. Decide what boundary you need with them. 3. Write yourself a permission slip. I, your name, give myself permission to disappoint people without being a bad person, prioritize my needs without being selfish, say no without guilt, take up space without apologizing, be imperfect and still be worthy, choose myself, sign it, date it, keep it somewhere you can see it daily. Within the next week, 4, have one uncomfortable conversation. Address something you've been avoiding. Set a boundary you've been afraid to set. Say something true that you've been swallowing. Your voice will shake. Your heart will race. You might feel like you're going to die. You won't die. You'll just finally start living. 5, protect 1 hour for yourself. 1 hour where you do exactly what you want without justifying it to anyone. Read, walk, stare at the wall, whatever you want. The content doesn't matter. The act of claiming time for yourself does. 6. Notice who gets uncomfortable with your changes. Pay attention to who pushes back when you set boundaries, who guilt trips you, who calls you selfish, who says you've changed. These people are showing you who benefited from your self-abandonment. This is valuable information. Within the next month, 7. Join or create a support structure. Find a therapist who specializes in boundaries and people-pleasing. Join a support group. Find one friend who's on a similar journey. You need witnesses and allies. 8. Make one decision based purely on what you want, not what's expected, not what's convenient for others, not what will avoid conflict, what you actually want. Maybe it's quitting a committee. Maybe it's ending a friendship. Maybe it's changing careers. Maybe it's saying yes to something you've always denied yourself. Do it. 9. Celebrate your sovereignty. Mark this transformation. Write about it. Create something. Tell someone. Make it real. You're not the person you were when you started reading this. You can never unknow what you now know. The truth about transformation. I need to tell you something important. This won't be a straight line. You will backslide. You will people-please out of habit. You will say yes when you meant to say no. You will catch yourself shrinking, performing, abandoning yourself. When this happens, not if, when, don't let it become evidence that you can't change. Let it be information about where you still need to practice. Transformation isn't about perfection. It's about direction. Are you moving toward sovereignty or away from it? That's the only question that matters. Some days you'll move toward it boldly. Some days you'll move toward it in tiny, trembling steps. Some days you'll stay still or even move backwards. All of it is part of the journey. The difference between the person who transforms and the person who stays stuck isn't that the transforming person never struggles. It's that they keep going anyway. The legacy question. I want to end with one final question, and I want you to really sit with it. What do you want people to say about you when you're gone? Not what you think you should want them to say, what you actually want. Do you want them to say, "She was so nice. She never said no to anyone"? Or do you want them to say, "She knew who she was. She lived with integrity. She showed us what it looks like to honor yourself"? Do you want them to say, "He made everyone comfortable. He never rocked the boat"? Or do you want them to say, "He stood for something. He had boundaries. He taught us that it's okay to take up space"? Your life is the answer to this question. Every day, you're writing the story that will be told about you. Every choice is a sentence in that story. What story are you writing? Is it the story of someone who slowly disappeared trying to be everything to everyone? Or is it the story of someone who claimed their sovereignty and lived fully, authentically, courageously? You're writing that story right now. This moment, this choice. Make it count. The final word. 500 years ago, Machiavelli wrote, "The prince not to celebrate cruelty, but to reveal truth. The truth that the world is not governed by how things should be, but by how things actually are. And the truth is this: the world respects those who respect themselves, not those who sacrifice themselves, not those who shrink themselves, not those who perform endless accommodation, hoping someone will notice their goodness. The world respects sovereignty. You've been waiting for permission to claim yours. Here it is. You have permission. Permission to say no, permission to take up space, permission to disappoint people, permission to prioritize yourself, permission to be human, imperfect, boundaried, and still worthy of love. You don't need anyone else's permission. You never did. The only permission that matters is the permission you give yourself. So give it. Stop waiting. Stop performing. Stop shrinking. Choose yourself. Finally, completely, unapologetically. Your sovereignty is waiting. Go claim it.